For as rounded and organic-looking as yesterday's Colani concept was, today's Focus vehicle goes completely the other direction and has all the angles that the Colani didn't, and a few more besides. That being said, there are some interesting parallels in the stories of the Colani and that of the Marcos Mantis XP. Designed in the late 1960s as the Marcos company's first foray into Group 6 prototype racing, it would be going up against a field that, as we know, was at the time dominated by Ford and Ferrari, with the rest of the field comprised of Lolas, increasingly competitive Porsche designs, and, in the intended year of the XP's Le Mans debut, the two delightful Howmet TXs. Marcos, founded by Jem Marsh and based in Wiltshire in the southwest of England, had made their name building small, sporty two-seaters for both road and racing applications, notably leveraging designer Frank Costin's experience working on de Havilland aircraft during the Second World War to build vehicles with laminated plywood monocoques rather than the more conventional metal or fiberglass options. This led to strong and lightweight designs, although one might imagine that termites were at risk. The Mantis XP was designed by Dennis and Peter Adams, who had joined the firm earlier in the decade and implemented a number of improvements to their current designs. They would also go on to design the Probe 16 concept car the subsequent year, best known for its appearance in a clockwork orange, and sharing a number of aesthetic similarities with the XP. The XP continued with the tried-and-true Marcos formula. The monocoque was stressed, laminated plywood, with front and rear subframes constructed from steel tubes, and bodywork was fiberglass panels. Originally, Mr. Marsh wanted the prototype to be powered by a V12 sourced from BRM, but the cost was quite high, and even when the money was produced, delays abounded, and Marsh instead went to Jack Brabham, purchasing a 3-liter Brabham Repco V8 from him while they were reportedly out for Chinese food. This F1-derived engine was mated to a similarly F1-focused Hewland 5-speed transaxle, and the fully independent suspension was lifted from the 1967 Cooper Formula One car. So, in all, we have yet another Formula One car for, well, it wasn't intended for the road, it was intended for just a different kind of racing. But anyway, engine output was reportedly somewhere around 250 horsepower, and the vehicle was quoted as being a featherweight 650 kilograms, or only 1,433 pounds. All of this was assembled underneath bodywork that, to me, has a pretty strong Blade Runner aesthetic, but was nevertheless quite purposeful. Similar to other vehicles of the era, the long nose was intended to provide favorable aerodynamic characteristics while sprinting down the Mulsanne Straight, while the cut-off cam-esque tail and slight lift in the rear sides behind the engine cover would probably have provided some downforce. The upper bodywork, namely the windows, doors, and roof, and not dissimilar to the Colani concept, was clear perspex, and I can foresee some of the same challenges when it came to drivers being roasted in direct sunlight, but at least the interior wasn't bright white. Visibility was probably pretty good for a prototype as well. Anyway, the first car was not quite ready for the Le Mans test weekend in April, needed to qualify for the race in June, although this was rendered partially a moot point when, as mentioned in the Howmet TX video, most of the country of France went on strike for several months, and the 1968 version of the 24-hour race was postponed indefinitely. The XP's first outing, then, was at the 1,000 kilometers of Spa in May. The weather, so frequently a factor during the Spa race, as we saw this year, again came to the forefront, and the 26th of May that year saw heavy rains throughout the day. To add to the team's difficulties on their debut outing, one of the drivers had pulled out, and Mr. Marsh took over the second spot. However, unlike his co-driver, he was rather a tall chap, at least 6'4", or 190 centimeters, I think, and he didn't really fit in the vehicle's tight cabin. Nevertheless, he took the start of the race, and the XP apparently ran well for the first 10 laps or so, and started to gain spots on the field after they put holes in the floor to drain the rainwater, but a spin at La Source lost a number of those regained places. 2 laps later, the alternator, which was exposed at the back end of the car, as we can see here, became dangerously wet, and the engine developed a misfire. The team didn't have the budget to risk blowing the engine, and with conditions as poor as they were, They decided that discretion was the better part of valor and preferred to live to fight on another day. Of course, this was not to be, and after the car was re-engined with a Buick V8, Marsh took to driving it as his personal vehicle, until the fine folks of Her Majesty's Customs and Excise came knocking for a ludicrously large tax assessment. Not wishing to pay the sum, he exported it to the U.S., also with the intent of having it make appearances at motor shows, but it was purchased after only a couple of appearances by a Mr. Tom Morris at the L.A. Auto Show. It stayed in their family for some years as their fun car, until a resurgence of interest at car shows, combined with its deteriorating condition in the early 2000s, prompted a restoration starting in 2004. Ready by the close of 2009, it returned to the UK for exhibition at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and continues, at least as best as my research can determine, to remain in the possession of the Morris family, lucky folks that they are. That brings us to the end of Day 3 of Oddity Week. Thank you, as always, for watching, and hope you'll be back for tomorrow's video. Have a good evening, all.